Well, really good to have you with us. And I mean, this declaration by President Putin of martial law in these four regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russian troops. What do you make of the significance of that?
Well, he's likely attempting to provide a legal justification for exercising more control and restriction of the Ukrainian people in those regions. I mean, we already know that the annexing these regions is a complete sham because he doesn't have complete control of those regions. And as a matter of fact, in two of them, he's losing territory. And certainly they're coming very close to Ukrainians taking over Kherson City, which is the only regional capital that the Russians managed to capture, and they did that very early on. And so the Ukrainians are focused on taking that back. We'll see what the implications are as this unfolds, but certainly it's not good for the Ukrainian people. We also know that he's moved hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians into Russia against their will, in addition to thousands of children who don't have parents against their will into Russia as well.
I mean, clearly the concern must be that in these areas which are already essentially under the occupation of Russian troops, that these martial law will give those troops the right, as they, in Russia's eyes at least, to carry out further brutality on the citizens in those areas.
That is likely the case. I mean, the sad reality is that General Sorovokin, who has taken over the command of the Russian-Ukrainian operation, when he was in Syria, was absolutely brutal, responsible for killing literally hundreds of thousands of Syrians, so much so that their air power that they use deep penetration bombs, Carol, to reach underground hospitals, focusing on doing just that. All war crimes, to be sure. And this thug and killer is now in charge of this operation. So I certainly, they have made up their minds because they cannot defeat the Ukraine military. They're pulling out all the stops that they can to defeat the Ukrainian people. And that certainly is a very dramatic and dangerous situation for the people in Ukraine.
Yeah, and we've already seen those drone strikes that have hit power stations and other critical infrastructure in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. And that also appears to be a tactic designed to impose the maximum amount of misery and suffering on the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, no doubt. And they're focusing on energy as well because they want to shut down the electric grid, power plants, and dams to, as winter sets in, to increase the suffering of the people. So what they're attempting to do is break the Ukrainian will of the people themselves. But, Carol, all of our contacts with the Ukrainian people indicates that it's not going to work. I mean, the Ukrainians are steadfast in their resolve to not to surrender at all, to support their soldiers who are fighting, who are obviously their sons, their fathers, their brothers, etc., who are out there. I mean, their steadfastness and resolve is really quite extraordinary. And your heart goes out to them, and with tremendous respect and admiration for who they are and what they're dealing with and what they're actually willing to cope with as well.
Indeed, and we saw earlier this week the British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace called to Washington for hasty talks with his US counterpart, and it seemed to be amidst renewed concern about a potential military strike by President Putin. Do you think that there is further concern about that now?
I don't have any indication of anything other than what has been quite normal. I do know that there's been a lot of activity from the United States and NATO members in attempting to get as much air defense systems into Ukraine given the fact that they're focusing on the cities where the people are living. And the Ukrainians have had a lot of success, but the Russians appear to be increasing the amount of drones that they're getting from the Iranians, which are now in the hundreds. And there's also some suspicion that the Iranians may actually give them short-range ballistic missiles, which could be quite devastating. So the air defense systems, they want the more sophisticated air defense systems to deal with that reality. And there's almost a full-court press to get those systems in as quickly as possible.